What happened to Spencer Dutton? What happened to young Jack Dutton? We're going to get into that right now on the Sundowners Club. Welcome. I'm your host, Sean. To my right, my co-host, Sterling. What's up, buddy?
Not much. How are you?
I'm good. So, coming off of 1923's first episode, the premiere, I was very excited about it. You know, I felt like going in, I had a lot of expectations. I felt like the episode lived up to it. You're never going to go wrong with Harrison Ford, so I thought he did a great job. Helen Mirren, held the fort down. I think she stole the first episode in terms of her character and what she portrayed. Then we also were introduced to several of the newer generation of Duttons in 1923 that were their father was played by Tim McGraw in the prequel to Yellowstone, 1883. And one of those was Spencer Dutton. Then we have young Jack Dutton that is the son of John Dutton Sr., who we saw a little bit in the first episode, and we'll get into that here for this episode. But we're going to cover it, Nature's Empty Throne. Before we get started with some of the scenes and the breakdown of the episode, what were your thoughts coming off of the premiere episode? Sometimes you have a little bit of a letdown when you have this big first episode of a new show or a prequel show in this case. What were your thoughts of episode 2? Excited?
I'm excited to see what's to come. I don't think it dropped off in quality at all.
Felt like a part 2, just a part 2.
Yeah,
of
it
the
did.
first episode.
I watched because I've been watching 1883, kind of catch up on everything. And
Does that help for you as a fan?
yeah, because it helps you know who's who, And you did the recap on the first episode, which helped a lot of people. But it helps me understand, John Dutton, especially, which we haven't really seen that much.
He's not referenced as John until episode 2.
Right.
His wife, Emma, calls him John. But
Who
in the
was
first
the
episode,
young boy in 1883.
He's a little boy, yeah.
So it's cool to kind of see that and what becomes of the family, 40 years later. I will say in that show, though, I thought it started off great, and I think I'm on episode 7. And for me,
Of 1883.
yeah, and it's kind of dropping off a little bit for me. So that may change by the end. But
They wrap it up for that particular story, which was a very insular story. In 1883, he always saw that. Taylor Sheridan, the creator of Yellowstone, and then 1923 and 1883, he saw that as a very limited series. Whereas I think he said that 1923 is going to go 2 seasons, which makes sense because Harrison Ford's not going to commit to anything maybe longer than that.
Yeah, he's 82 now, isn't he? He's
over 80.
Yeah, he's in his 80s. So
which is amazing, that he's had the longevity he's had, but he's one of the legendary great actors. So
yeah, he is. But I think the show maintained its quality. There wasn't any drop off. I'm still excited for the season. So I mean, it's one of the few reasons to own Paramount Plus. I think
it's the brand. It's the IP that if you're going to look at a streaming provider and you're considering Paramount Plus, the Yellowstone brand is certainly one. I mean, you've got 3 shows.
That's their main one right now.
And more shows supposedly coming tied into that world. So we start off in this episode titled Nature's Empty Throne with Spencer. We're back in Africa, which I really enjoy. The cinematography, I've talked about how amazing Yellowstone has looked in the Yellowstone series in 1923, the first episode. And there's more of the same, but what I've enjoyed about this is the story of Spencer Dutton. And Spencer, who in 1883 is not born yet, but Spencer is a World War I hero. We find out he's traumatized. He's in Nairobi. He's just, taking a job to try to protect a safari group from a leopard attack. And when we end the first episode, we find Spencer has discovered that there are not 1 but 2 leopards. He's killed one of them, and the second leopard is now attacking him. And we think, is he dead? Is he alive? And the episode ends on a cliffhanger. And so in episode 2, we find Spencer stabbing the leopard, and he's getting clawed by the leopard. And he has 2 guides with him that are trying to save him. The leopard jumps off of Spencer and kills one of the guides. And it gives Spencer a chance to set his sights with his gun on the leopard and kill the second leopard. But he's wounded in the results of that. And so back at camp, we see Spencer downing whiskey, and he's trying to keep from getting gangrene, so he needs to tend to his wounds. and he's got a doctor tending to him. And then we find out that his benefactor, the guy that hired him, knew that there were 2 leopards. And I guess the assumption is that he didn't say that because he thought maybe nobody would show up, take the job. Right. Was that your impression that he held it back?
Well, he acted like he didn't know. Like he still didn't know. So they don't really clarify on that.
Yeah, because Spencer's basically going to kill him. Right. He's got the gun pointed.
Yeah, he's one of his guides died, and he's upset about it.
Yeah, and that's what he was mad about, is that he said you should apologize. You didn't see the value of this guy's life, and Spencer certainly does. And that's a little. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a little bit of a window into the fact that Spencer doesn't seem to play into class systems, the color of one's skin. He's a guy that he judges you based on merit and who you are as a human being. We get a little sense of that in the first 2 episodes. That's why I really like Spencer. But he's certainly a tortured and conflicted character. But he basically tells them, "I would kill you, but I need to ride back to Nairobi." And so we know he's headed back to Nairobi after he's killed the 2 leopards, and they want to send his guide's body back to the family tribe, so that he can have a ceremonial burial. And then we cut back to Yellowstone, and we have another character, young Jack, who is Harrison Ford. Jacob Dutton is his great uncle, and John Dutton Sr., who's Jacob Dutton's right-hand man, is Jack's father. Mm-hmm. And Jack has spotted the sheep that Banner Creighton, played by Jerome Flynn from Game of Thrones, has led his sheep onto Jacob Dutton's land, because if not, they're going to die. They need to graze. And Jack has spotted the sheep, and at the end of the first episode, he's been shot. And we think, you and I have talked about, Jack's dying, right?
He looks like that character that's definitely going to die, but he lived. So he
made it through the first episode.
And he made it through episode 2.
So we see him laying on the ground. But you know who wasn't as fortunate? His horse.
That's right.
So the guy either had a bad shot or just wanted to kill his horse, because the horse is dead and he's laying on Jack, and Jack's trying to get free, but he's not going to make it in time. Luckily, Jacob hears the gunshots off in the distance, and his crew arrives, and they start taking out Banner Creighton's crew. And the guys that survive are probably not as fortunate as guys who got shot, because they get rounded up, and Jacob tells Banner Creighton, "I told you what I would do if I caught you with your sheep on someone's land." And so he strings them up and hangs them from a tree. But Jacob, I guess in his mind and conscience, feeling a sense of fairness, he's going to give them that small chance to live by putting them on their horses. Oh. So they're hung from a tree, but they're sitting on horses. And when Banner Creighton awakes, because I guess he passed out or fell asleep, he wakes, everybody's hung, they're dead. And he's still sitting on his horse, and he sees another horse come up, and he in a relaxed way, gets the horse to come up and get a knife. He frees himself. So Banner has survived. And what are your thoughts on where Banner is going to go now? Because he's lost everything. His sheep, we're going to talk in a second about what happened to his sheep, but,
I think it's going to lead into a range war. I knew they weren't going to kill him, because that's a pretty big actor, at least as of late. He was in Game of Thrones. We knew they weren't going to bring him over from Game of Thrones, and then just have him die in the first 2 episodes. So yeah, it wouldn't make any sense. He's a good actor. I think he'll probably be the main antagonist. Either him or Timothy Dalton, I think, is supposed to pop up.
I'm thinking Timothy Dalton. We haven't seen his character yet, but Banner Creighton, Jerome Flynn's character, he's lost his livelihood. Jacob Dutton sends his right-hand guy, I think it's Zane, to take the sheep and give them to they go over past their border of their lands, and we see some Native Americans and that they give the sheep to. And so Banner's lost his livelihood, and so the only thing he's got is himself. So he's got to hitch his wagon to someone with some money and power if he's going to fight Jacob Dutton.
Right.
And maybe that's where Timothy Dalton's going to come in. But you definitely know the fight between Banner Creighton.
Yeah, he's going to be back.
No doubt about that. So that's just starting, and so we see Jacob, talking around the campfire with John Sr. about that, and about keeping the land. It's not about the bears and the wild animals and the wolves. It's about man, and that's your biggest threat. And so we see a little bit of that, and then we cut back to last week's episode that I thought was the hardest part to watch, but I also was fascinated by because of the historical accuracy. We go back to the schoolhouse run by Sister Alice and Father Renault and of the Native American girls, the boarding school, where they're basically tortured and abused. And we see Tiana Rainwater, and again, her spirit, she's still fighting. So she's eating dinner and she sees in a bowl of food maggots, and she starts speaking in her native language, which I guess they don't want them to speak in their native language. They're trying to break them of that, right?
Yeah, she's trying to. What'd she say? I'm going to kill the Indian in you, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever they speak their native language, they feel like they're regressing. So they don't want them. They want them to adopt the ways of the new world. And I'm not sure is that a Protestant school? I don't know. Or Catholic?
I think it's Catholic.
Catholic.
His father,
yeah.
He's got
Catholic, obviously, because that's right. And so they want them to adopt Christianity, and that's she's pretty brutal about it. So
yeah, she gets in another fight with Sister Alice, and this time they take Tiana Rainwater and they put her in a hot box, and she almost dies. So I think Father Renault tells her, if you put your hands on anybody again or you get into another scuffle, I'm going to bury you alive.
Yeah.
And so we feel like we're just starting to tap into what we're going to see from Father Renault, an evil character, and with a major dark side. And so Tiana Rainwater, she makes it out, but she can't barely stand up. She's got a fever. So we see her then inside in a bath, and another nun is molesting her, and Sister Alice breaks it up, stops it, which is a very strange scene because it's this duality between Sister Alice, who has caused all this pain and abused Tiana, but now she stops this other nun, and she says, "You've got a fever." She puts ice in there, and she's trying to come to some sort of common ground with Tiana in a sense, but was your take that that's what she was doing, or she's trying to break her, or?
I think
she's on Sister Alice in that role.
I think she thinks that she's trying to save her, but I mean, she obviously has a personal vendetta against her. So she has, I guess, good intentions, but she's just
they're definitely weaving a web that Sister Alice, as bad as she's been to Tiana and abusive, and is a little different than Father Renault. They're almost setting up like maybe there's going to be something more to this Tiana and Sister Alice relationship.
Yeah.
I feel like Sister Alice is going to die, but we
saving Tiana, helping her escape or something.
Who knows? But they're definitely setting it up for there to be some sort of more of a layer to that relationship than Father Renault. Who I think is more clear what we're going to see there. But Tiana's so weak, she can't fight much. She just looks at her, and then we see Tiana's grandmother. I thought the historical part of this was fascinating. Tiana's grandmother shows up to speak with the superintendent and is saying, look, her mother's dead, her father's gone, I'm the only family she's got. And we know from history, Taylor Sheridan's really good about the accuracy of the history, that Native Americans were robbed of their identities. We had them exposed to our legal systems, which they didn't know anything about at the time. And you see that in this scene where the superintendent's like, look, I don't know you're her family, and you got to go before the judge, and you got to get this paperwork. And the grandmother doesn't know anything about that.
Yeah, she doesn't. She doesn't understand the process of it, and
it reminds you of how.
Really care.
And it reminds you of how once the lands were taken, they created deeds and titles and created this legal process with which to justify how the Native Americans were treated. So I felt like that was something that Taylor Sheridan covers that very accurately, and I enjoy those scenes around the Native Americans because I think it's going to weave into the larger story around the Duttons for 1923. But I was fascinated by that, and then we go back to Africa, which is the majority of this episode takes place in Africa, which I liked. And Spencer is back in Nairobi, and he's doing what he does best when he's not killing. He's drinking. And a young British woman named Alexandra is having an engagement party at the club where Spencer's drinking. And she sees him and goes up to him and says, are you the World War I hero and the lion killer and the legend? And so they start talking, and she's fascinated by his perceived life, right? And I thought his character was really cool, the way he played it off. And then, as she says, look, you've done these great things, and he tells her there's no romance in it. And then she asks him, well, why do you do it? And his line that I thought was great, Taylor Sheridan's writing is great in this episode. Spencer says, because dying is the most alive you'll ever feel. And I think that sums up what we've seen from Spencer in the first 2 episodes. He's trying to live by cheating death. Like, that's his way.
She falls in love instantly.
Yeah.
As soon as he says that.
The rogue character. And then she tells him when he says dying's the most alive you'll ever feel. And she says, you don't see the romance in that. So we know right away she's completely smitten.
Right.
And then she has her engagement party and leaves the dinner and sees him again at the bar and starts talking to him. And the conversation gets deeper. And then her fiance breaks it up. And then the next morning we see her as the episode ends. We see her running down the road and she jumps in. She leaves her fiance and runs and jumps in the car with Spencer and joins him off for his new adventure. And so obviously, that's going to create more of a layer to when Spencer actually returns. So how do you think Spencer's going to play into the range war? He's in Africa right now. What's your thoughts about what's going to happen with Spencer in regards to the Duttons?
Well, I feel like things are probably going to get bad for the Duttons. I'm guessing. And then I think Spencer's going to be the muscle. I would expect. He seems like that character, the guy that's
the wild card.
Yeah, the guy that they're going to need to help him out.
Yeah, because you've got Jacob and his crew, Zane and John Dutton Sr. and Jack and everybody.
And that could happen that might not even happen this season. Yeah, it could happen next season.
But these are characters that we've seen in Yellowstone that the people that are going to be fighting them, they're going to size all that up and know what to expect from them. Well, you can't size up Spencer because
he's been in Africa.
He's not around, so he is the ultimate wild card. And I do think that there was one small scene. Helen Mirren was not in this episode much for episode 2 compared to episode 1, but she does have a scene with John Dutton Sr.'s wife, Emma, back at the house, and they're talking about how different Jack is than John Sr., and talking about marriage and the differences in what it takes to support a rancher. And Emma says, her thoughts around Elizabeth and Jack marrying, and Kara says to her, it seems your son is marrying gasoline, my dear, and the fire will only get bigger. So we've got the duality between what's happening in Africa right now with Spencer and Alexandra at the beginning of that, Jack and Elizabeth. And so these young, passionate people that have hopes and dreams and fears and all the things that play into that, and the balance of that to what's happening with a little bit older, wiser John Dutton Sr. and Emma, and then Kara and Jacob, and what's going to happen with the protecting of the land. I think that's a great balance between those two storylines that are going to merge.
Right.
And so final thoughts, you expect to see more of Spencer and his role in it, but looking forward to seeing Timothy Dalton. What are your final thoughts on the first 2 episodes? Because it seemed like this was a 2-parter.
Yeah.
This was really tied
so
into
far
one
it's
large
good.
episode.
It's maintained the high quality. It is it's refreshing to watch something on TV and see that it's not filmed on a green screen. You talked about how good it looked, but it's actually
the setting is a character.
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't see that much anymore. Almost everything's a fake set, just CGI in the background, and they're actually, in open fields.
Well, there's a reason why people are traveling out there to see the real land and the real Dutton Ranch, and that people, the fandom, is very invested in that as a character.
Right.
And you're right. We don't see that much anymore.
But I'm excited to see where it goes. I think it's maintained a pretty consistent level of quality so far, and I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, we're going to be here to cover it. I'm really excited about it. My expectations have been met the first 2 episodes. Again, Taylor Sheridan, he's one of those few individuals that at this point he's earned my trust. So I'm all in on the Yellowstone show, the series, the larger IP around that, and specifically 1923. We'll be here to cover it. If you like what you saw and heard today, leave a comment below, hit the like button, and most importantly, hit subscribe so that we can grow the channel and the content. And TCB.